Have you ever felt utterly betrayed, not just by a stranger, but by your own flesh and blood? The kind of betrayal that cuts deeper than any knife, leaving you raw and exposed. I'm talking about the special kind of pain only family can inflict. Today, I'm going to tell you a story about just that. A story about a son who thought he could publicly humiliate his father, a son who thought he was untouchable, a son who had absolutely no idea what was coming. This isn't just another tale of family drama. This is a story of arrogance meeting its match, of disrespect being met with a calculated response, and ultimately, of a lesson learned, the hard way. It's a story about money, power, and the surprising ways they can be used, or misused. Think of it as a real-life morality play, with a hefty dose of financial karma. The core of this story revolves around a retired financial planner, a man named Arthur Vance. Now, Arthur wasn't your typical retiree. He wasn't spending his days golfing or lounging on a beach. Arthur lived a simple life, almost to a fault. He had a modest apartment, drove an older car, and generally kept to himself. To the outside world, he seemed like a regular, unassuming old man. But beneath that unassuming exterior lay a sharp mind and a deep understanding of the financial world. He was a legend in his own right, known for his meticulousness and his uncanny ability to predict market trends. He was, in a word, brilliant. He also possessed a hidden power, a power that would soon be unleashed. Arthur was the architect of the Vance Family Trust, a complex and virtually unbreakable financial structure of his own design. He knew every clause, every loophole, every single detail of that 200-page document better than anyone else on the planet. And that, my friends, is where our story truly begins. Then there's Ethan, Arthur's only son. Ethan lived a life of extreme luxury, fueled by the generous monthly allowance he received from the trust fund his father had established. He ran a failing startup, but always managed to portray himself as a successful businessman. He flaunted his wealth, drove expensive cars, and surrounded himself with people who, let's just say, weren't exactly interested in his personality. Ethan saw his father's simple lifestyle as an embarrassment. He couldn't understand why Arthur would choose to live so modestly when he had access to so much wealth. Ethan viewed his father as out of touch, old-fashioned, and frankly, a bit of a nuisance. He repeatedly ignored Arthur's calls, dismissed his advice, and generally treated him with a level of disrespect that was truly appalling. Ethan had two fatal flaws, arrogance and laziness. He'd never bothered to actually read the trust documents that governed his life. He only knew the amount of money that landed in his account each month. He assumed it would always be there, a never-ending source of funds to fuel his lavish lifestyle. He believed he was entitled to it, that it was his birthright. He never stopped to consider where it came from, or the conditions attached to it. He was living in a fool's paradise, completely oblivious to the ticking time bomb that was about to explode. The breaking point came at Ethan's birthday party. It was a lavish affair, held at an exclusive restaurant, filled with Ethan's equally extravagant friends. Arthur, despite Ethan's constant snubs, had come to celebrate his son's birthday. He even brought a gift, a thoughtful, albeit not particularly flashy, present. When it came time to pay the bill, Arthur reached for his credit card, intending to cover the cost of his son's gift. But the card was declined. A wave of embarrassment washed over Arthur as he tried again, with the same result. Then, Ethan, in a moment of breathtaking cruelty, burst into laughter. He announced, loud enough for the entire table to hear, "Dad, I've blocked your secondary card. You need to learn to manage your spending better." The humiliation on Arthur's face was palpable, a stark contrast to the smug amusement on Ethan's. It was a public declaration of disrespect, a deliberate attempt to belittle his father in front of his peers. It was, in short, the last straw. That moment changed everything. It was the catalyst that transformed Arthur from a sad, unassuming old man into a force to be reckoned with. As Arthur walked out of that restaurant, without a word, a plan began to form in his mind. A plan that would not only teach his son a valuable lesson but would also remind him of the importance of respect and family values. This wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about justice, about restoring balance, about reminding Ethan that money isn't everything. Back in his modest apartment, Arthur opened his safe and retrieved the original copy of the Vance family trust contract. The years seemed to melt away as he scanned the document, his eyes as sharp and focused as they had been at the height of his career. He knew exactly what he had to do. He reached for the phone, a glint of determination in his eyes. It was time to unleash the power he had carefully crafted years ago. It was time for Ethan to face the consequences of his actions. And believe me, those consequences were far more severe than he could ever have imagined. This is where things get really interesting, so stick around to find out what happens next. You won't believe the lengths Arthur goes to, and the shocking transformation Ethan undergoes. It's a story of comeuppance, redemption, and the enduring power of family, even when it seems all but lost. Don't forget to like and subscribe for part 2. Alright, where were we? Ah yes, the humiliation. The utter, stinging humiliation of my own son, Ethan, canceling my credit card at his own birthday party. In front of everyone. He thought he was teaching me a lesson about managing my money. Irony, isn't it? Little did he know, he was about to get a lesson of his own, a crash course in respect, humility, and the enduring power of a well-crafted trust fund. The anger, oh, the anger. It wasn't just the public shaming, though that stung. It was the years of disrespect, the constant condescension, the way he looked at my simple life as some kind of personal failing. He saw my frugality as weakness, not as the careful stewardship of resources I'd spent a lifetime building. He saw my old car as an embarrassment, not as a reliable machine that served its purpose perfectly well. He saw my small apartment as a sign of failure, not as a conscious choice to live modestly and avoid the trappings of excessive wealth. He saw everything wrong. But beneath the anger, a cold calculation began to take hold. Ethan had always been arrogant, lazy, and utterly uninterested in the details of his own financial well-being. He knew the money came, he spent it lavishly, and he never bothered to ask where it came from or how it was managed. He'd never read the Vance family trust documents, not even the summary. He simply assumed the money would always be there, flowing endlessly into his account. That was his fatal mistake. The drive home that night was silent, filled only with the hum of my perfectly functional, though admittedly older, car. Each passing mile cemented my resolve. This wasn't about money. This was about respect. This was about teaching my son a lesson he desperately needed to learn. This was about reclaiming the dignity he had so carelessly stripped away. When I got back to my apartment, the sadness that had lingered for so long began to dissipate. I wasn't that sad old man anymore. I was Arthur Vance, the architect of the Vance Family Trust, the financial planner who could see around corners and anticipate risks. I was the man who built an empire of wealth, and I was about to use that empire to teach my son a valuable lesson. The safe in my closet hadn't been opened in years. Inside, nestled among other important documents, was the original copy of the trust fund agreement. The paper was thick, the ink still crisp. As I read through the pages, my eyes sharpened, my mind racing. I knew exactly what I had to do. Article 27B. Moral standards and family responsibilities. A seemingly innocuous clause, buried deep within the 200-page document. Ethan had never heard of it, let alone read it. It stipulated that in order to receive the full benefits of the trust, the beneficiary must demonstrate respect for the founders and family values. Failure to do so would result in a reduction of payments to the statutory minimum living allowance, until such time as the beneficiary completed a character improvement program designated by the fund manager. And who was the fund manager? Yours truly. The next morning, I called my old friend and lawyer, David. He'd helped me set up the trust years ago, and he knew exactly what I was planning. There was a pause on the other end of the line, a moment of stunned silence. Then, a low chuckle. "Arthur, you old dog," he said. "I always knew you had something up your sleeve. My plan wasn't to simply cut Ethan off. That would be too easy. It wouldn't teach him anything. My plan was to force him to confront the consequences of his actions, to experience life without the cushion of endless wealth, to learn the value of hard work and genuine human connection. It was a plan born of frustration, fueled by anger, and tempered by a deep, albeit buried, love for my son. It was time for Ethan to grow up. And I was going to be the one to make it happen. The wheels were in motion. The game had begun. And Ethan, bless his heart, had no idea what was coming. He was about to learn that money isn't everything, and that sometimes, the greatest inheritance is a lesson in humility. And Ethan, bless his heart, had no idea what was coming. He was about to learn that money isn't everything, and that sometimes, the greatest inheritance is a lesson in humility. I remember sitting there, in my quiet apartment, the sting of his public ridicule still burning. The clinking of the teacup against the saucer seemed deafening in the silence. It wasn't about the money, it was the disrespect, the blatant disregard for the years I'd poured into building a secure future for him, a future he clearly took for granted. The anger, a cold, controlled fury, simmered beneath the surface. I opened the safe, the heavy steel door groaning slightly, revealing the familiar documents within. The Vance Family Trust. My masterpiece. 200 pages of meticulously crafted clauses and contingencies, designed to protect not just the assets, but the values I held dear. Ethan had never bothered to read it, of course. Why would he? He just saw the monthly transfers, the endless stream of cash that fueled his extravagant lifestyle. He thought he had it all figured out. That's where he was wrong. Terribly wrong. I called my old friend, David, my lawyer, the only man who knew the full extent of the trust's intricacies. His voice, calm and reassuring, was a welcome sound. I explained the situation, the humiliation, the blatant disregard. David, I said, my voice steady, it's time to invoke Article 27B. There was a pause on the other end. Arthur, are you sure? This is drastic. Drastic times, David, I replied, call for drastic measures. He needs to learn a lesson that money alone cannot teach. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, the man who had dedicated his life to maximizing wealth, now using that very wealth to teach my son a lesson about its limitations. It was a calculated move, a chess game where the stakes were Ethan's future, and my own peace of mind. The next few days were a blur of legal paperwork and carefully worded emails. David handled everything with his usual precision. The notification to Ethan was brief, clinical, and utterly devastating. The Vance Family Trust has been restructured under Section 27B. Your monthly allowance is now $2,200. Just enough to cover basic necessities. No more luxury watches, no more penthouse, no more lavish parties. The dominoes began to fall with satisfying speed. I pictured Ethan's face when he received that email. The disbelief, the anger, the dawning realization that his life was about to change dramatically. A wave of something akin to satisfaction washed over me, quickly followed by a pang of sadness. This wasn't the outcome I had envisioned. I wanted him to be successful, happy, but not at the expense of his integrity. Then came the phone call, the frantic, pleading voice I hadn't heard in years. Dad, what have you done? You're ruining my life. I remained calm, my voice measured. Ethan, I'm giving you an opportunity. An opportunity to learn the value of hard work, the importance of respect, the meaning of humility. He sputtered, protested, threatened. It was all noise. I had made my decision. The confrontation at my apartment was inevitable. He burst in, disheveled and desperate, a far cry from the polished businessman he pretended to be. He begged, he pleaded, he even tried to apologize, but it was too late. The line had been crossed. I handed him a piece of paper, the Character Improvement Program. 8 hours a day volunteering at a soup kitchen, 6 months to relearn the value of money and respect. A $50 daily limit on his credit card for food and transportation. It was harsh, I knew. But sometimes, the only way to truly learn is to experience the consequences of your actions. I watched him walk away, defeated and humbled. The frustration and determination on his face mirrored my own from years ago, when I was just starting out. He had a long road ahead of him. In the aftermath, I felt a strange sense of peace. The anger had subsided, replaced by a quiet resolve. I used the trust fund profits to establish a charity providing free financial advice to seniors who had been financially abused by their children. It was a way to turn my pain into purpose, to help others avoid the same fate. The respect I received from those I helped was more valuable than any amount of money. Ethan's journey was just beginning, and mine had taken an unexpected turn. I hoped, one day, he would understand. And maybe, just maybe, he would become a better man because of it. I hoped, one day, he would understand. And maybe, just maybe, he would become a better man because of it. The anger still simmers, you know. It's not the money, never was. It was the sheer disrespect, the public humiliation. To be cut off, dismissed, by your own son, in front of people who clearly relished my discomfort, it stung. It stung deep. The irony, of course, is delicious. He thought he was teaching me a lesson about managing money. He, who never earned a single dollar of his own. He, whose entire existence was funded by a trust one meticulously crafted to protect him, and, as it turns out, to protect the family's legacy from him. The calm calculation that followed his little stunt was almost therapeutic. I knew, the moment those words left his lips, that he had crossed a line. A line I had anticipated, planned for, years ago. Article 27b. Moral Standards and Family Responsibilities. It was a clause born of a deep-seated fear, a premonition that my son, despite all my efforts, might succumb to the corrosive influence of wealth. It was a safety net, a fail-safe, designed to ensure that the Vance name would not be dragged through the mud by some spoiled, entitled brat. And, tragically, he proved my fears correct. The sheer audacity of it all. He actually believed he could control me, manipulate me with my own money. He underestimated me. He underestimated the power of a father's disappointment, a father's resolve. He saw an aging man, perhaps a little out of touch, and not the financial titan I once was, the architect of his very fortune. The phone call to my old lawyer was satisfying. Hearing his initial surprise, then his growing understanding, and finally, his quiet admiration for the clause I had so cleverly inserted all those years ago. He understood the gravity of the situation, the potential for chaos, but also the opportunity for redemption. Restructuring the trust was a clinical process, a dispassionate application of the law. But beneath the surface, a storm raged. The frustration of seeing my son squander his potential, the determination to salvage what was left of his character, and the almost unbearable sadness of knowing that I had to inflict this pain upon him. The dominoes fell quickly. The declined credit cards, the repossessed car, the abandoned penthouse. Each event, a painful reminder of his recklessness, his entitlement. The fiancée, of course, vanished like smoke in the wind. She was only ever interested in the money, a fact that only amplified my disappointment in Ethan's poor judgment. His friends, those shallow sycophants, were the first to disappear. They were drawn to his wealth, not to him as a person. And when the money dried up, so did their loyalty. It was a harsh lesson, but a necessary one. A lesson about the true nature of friendship, the importance of integrity, and the fleeting nature of material possessions. The final confrontation in my humble apartment, that was the hardest. Seeing him disheveled, desperate, pleading for forgiveness. The anger was still there, but it was overshadowed by a profound sense of pity. He was a broken man, stripped of his illusions, forced to confront the consequences of his actions. The character improvement program. It wasn't about punishment, it was about rehabilitation. The soup kitchen was a crucible, a place where he would be forced to interact with people who had genuine needs, people who had worked hard their entire lives and still struggled to make ends meet. It was a chance for him to develop empathy, to understand the value of hard work, and to appreciate the blessings he had taken for granted. The $50 daily limit was a practical measure, a way to ensure that he learned to budget, to prioritize his needs over his wants. It was a far cry from the extravagant lifestyle he had become accustomed to, but it was a necessary step in his journey back to reality. I don't know if he will ever truly understand. I don't know if he will ever forgive me. But I had to try. I had to do something to prevent him from spiraling further into the abyss of self-destruction. And the charity, that was the final piece of the puzzle. Turning the profits from the trust into a resource for others, for seniors who had been financially exploited by their own families. It was a way to channel my anger, my frustration, into something positive, something meaningful. Maybe, just maybe, this whole ordeal will serve as a cautionary tale. A reminder that money is not everything, that respect and family values are far more important. And perhaps, one day, Ethan will understand that the greatest inheritance he received was not the money, but the opportunity to learn from his mistakes and become a better person. Share this story, let it be a lesson. Protect your family's legacy, both financially and morally. Don't let wealth corrupt your values. Okay, here's the continuation of the script, aiming for 1,000 words and adhering to all your specifications. So, where were we? Ah yes, protecting the family legacy. Easier said than done, isn't it? You pour your heart and soul into building something, a business, a reputation, a life, and then you hope, you desperately pray, that the next generation will appreciate it, nurture it, build upon it. Sometimes, though, you get Ethan. And trust me, there are a lot of Ethans out there. Spoiled, entitled, and utterly clueless about the value of a hard-earned dollar. The irony, the sheer, biting irony, is that I spent my entire career guiding people on how to manage their wealth, how to protect it from market fluctuations, from bad investments, even from themselves. I built impenetrable financial fortresses for my clients. Yet, I somehow failed to adequately prepare my own son for the responsibilities that come with such privilege. I was so focused on building the empire, I neglected to teach him how to rule it wisely. The anger, the white-hot, simmering rage that I felt at that restaurant, it wasn't just about the credit card. It was about the years of disrespect, the constant belittling of my lifestyle, the thinly veiled contempt for the values I tried to instill in him. It was the culmination of a lifetime of disappointment, a realization that I had somehow failed as a father, despite all my professional successes. But anger, unchecked, is a destructive force. It clouds judgment, it leads to rash decisions. And that's where the calculation came in. The years of crafting complex financial instruments, of anticipating every possible loophole and contingency, suddenly found a new purpose. I wasn't just a grieving father anymore, I was a financial strategist, a chess master about to execute a perfectly calculated checkmate. Section 27b. Moral Standards and Family Responsibilities. It was a clause born out of years of observing the corrosive effects of wealth on families. I had seen it tear siblings apart, destroy marriages, and turn promising young adults into hollow shells of their former selves. The clause was designed to be a safety net, a last resort to prevent the Vance family trust from becoming a source of destruction rather than a source of good. Ethan, of course, never bothered to read it. He saw the money rolling in each month and assumed it was his birthright, a never-ending stream of resources to fuel his extravagant lifestyle. He was too busy jet-setting around the world, attending exclusive parties, and launching and failing at one ridiculous startup after another to concern himself with the fine print. His arrogance was his undoing. The calm that washed over me as I retrieved the original trust documents from the safe was almost unsettling. It was the calm of a surgeon preparing for a delicate operation, the calm of a pilot navigating through a turbulent storm. I knew exactly what I had to do, and I was prepared to do it with unwavering resolve. Calling my old lawyer was like summoning an old warhorse. He understood the gravity of the situation immediately. He knew the complexities of the trust better than anyone, and he shared my concern about Ethan's trajectory. He was more than just a lawyer, he was a confidant, a trusted advisor who understood the importance of upholding the Vance family values. The implementation was swift and brutal. The email informing Ethan of the restructuring of the trust, the sudden denial of his credit cards, it was all designed to shock him out of his complacency, to force him to confront the consequences of his actions. His life unraveling was not something I took pleasure in. Believe me, watching your own son's world crumble around him is agonizing. But I also knew that it was necessary. He needed to hit rock bottom in order to understand the value of hard work, the importance of humility, and the true meaning of respect. The confrontation in my modest apartment was intense. The screaming, the pleading, the desperate attempts to manipulate me with guilt and tears, it was all a performance, a desperate attempt to regain control. But I stood firm. I had a plan, and I was determined to see it through. The character improvement program, as I called it, was not designed to punish him. It was designed to rehabilitate him. Volunteering at the soup kitchen, serving those less fortunate, facing the realities of poverty and hardship, it was meant to instill empathy, to teach him gratitude, and to force him to confront his own privileged existence. And yes, the $50 daily limit on his credit card was a deliberate act of severity. He needed to experience the limitations that most people face every day, to understand the struggle of making ends meet. The aftermath, well, that's still unfolding. I see glimpses of change in him. He's learning to be more responsible, more compassionate, more human. The trust fund profits are now being used to help seniors who have been financially abused by their own children. It's a way of turning a personal tragedy into something positive, of creating a legacy of compassion and justice. And me? I've found a new purpose, a new sense of fulfillment in helping others. The peace I feel now, knowing that I'm making a difference, is worth more than all the money in the world. It's about tolerance, and eventually, reconciliation. Don't let money define your family. Let values guide your legacy. Don't let money define your family. Let values guide your legacy. That's the lesson I hope to instill in my son, Ethan. But somewhere along the way, he seemed to have missed the point entirely. He saw the Vance family name, the Vance family wealth, as an entitlement, not a responsibility. The irony, of course, is that I, Arthur Vance, a man who dedicated his life to prudent financial planning, had inadvertently created a monster. A gilded cage, perhaps, but a cage nonetheless. The anger still simmers, a low, persistent burn. To be humiliated in front of his friends, at his own birthday party, was, well, it was a new low, even for Ethan. He thought he was teaching me a lesson about managing my spending. He, who had never worked a day in his life, lecturing me, the architect of his very fortune. The sheer audacity of it. But beneath the anger, there was a cold, calculating resolve. I had spent decades crafting the Vance family trust, a labyrinthine structure designed to protect the family's wealth for generations to come. And within that structure, buried deep within the fine print, was a clause, a safeguard, against exactly this kind of behavior. Article 27b, Moral Standards and Family Responsibilities. A forgotten relic, perhaps, but a powerful weapon nonetheless. My plan wasn't born out of spite. It was born out of necessity. Ethan needed a course correction, a harsh dose of reality. He needed to understand that money doesn't buy respect, it doesn't buy happiness, and it certainly doesn't buy family loyalty. He needed to learn the value of hard work, of humility, of human connection. And if that meant invoking a little-known clause in his trust fund, then so be it. The calm that washed over me as I retrieved the original trust documents from my safe was almost unnerving. It was the calm of a chess master contemplating his next move, the calm of a surgeon preparing for a delicate operation. I knew the risks, I knew the potential consequences, but I also knew that this was the only way to save my son from himself. The implementation was swift and merciless. The email from the law firm, informing Ethan of the restructuring of the trust and the drastic reduction in his monthly allowance, was a masterstroke of legal precision. $2,200 a month. That's barely enough to cover rent, let alone maintain his lavish lifestyle. The dominoes began to fall almost immediately. The luxury car repossessed, the penthouse foreclosed, the fiancé, gone. His startup, a vanity project fueled by endless infusions of trust fund money, crumbled under the weight of its own incompetence. His friends, those fair-weather companions who flocked to him like moths to a flame, vanished as quickly as they had appeared. He was alone, stripped bare, exposed to the harsh realities of the world. The confrontation in my small apartment was predictable. The shouting, the pleading, the desperate attempts to manipulate me with guilt and crocodile tears. But I stood firm, unmoved by his theatrics. He had made his bed, now he had to lie in it. The character improvement program was not designed to punish him. It was designed to rehabilitate him. Volunteering at a soup kitchen, serving the less fortunate, witnessing the struggles of those who had nothing, it was a brutal education, but a necessary one. The $50 daily limit on his credit card was not about deprivation, it was about constraint, about learning to prioritize needs over wants. 6 months. 6 months of humility, of hard work, of genuine human connection. It wouldn't magically transform him into a saint, but it might just plant a seed of empathy, a spark of understanding. The aftermath is still unfolding. Ethan is different. He's quieter, more thoughtful. He's learned to appreciate the simple things in life, the things that money can't buy. He's still struggling, of course. Old habits die hard. But he's making progress. And that's all I can ask for. As for the trust fund profits, I've used the majority of them to establish a charity that provides free financial advice to seniors who have been financially abused by their children. It's a way of turning a personal tragedy into something positive, of helping others avoid the same fate. It's a way of finding purpose in the pain, of finding peace in the storm. And hopefully, it's a legacy that my son can one day be proud of. It's about more than just money, it's about protecting the vulnerable and teaching the next generation that true wealth lies in character, not in capital. Remember, family is built on values, not just valuations. It's about more than just money, it's about protecting the vulnerable and teaching the next generation that true wealth lies in character, not in capital. Remember, family is built on values, not just valuations. And sometimes, those values need a little recalibration. The silence after I handed Ethan that piece of paper, outlining his character improvement program, was thick enough to cut with a knife. He looked at me, then at the paper, then back at me, his face a mask of disbelief and simmering rage. I could see the cogs turning in his head, trying to process the sheer audacity of it all. Me, his father, the old man he'd dismissed for so long, dictating the terms of his existence. The irony, of course, was utterly lost on him. He saw it as a punishment, a cruel and unusual one at that. He didn't understand it was an intervention, a last-ditch effort to salvage something from the wreckage of his entitled life. The first few weeks were, predictably, a disaster. Ethan showed up at the soup kitchen late, reeking of expensive cologne, and proceeded to complain about the smell, the clientele, and the general indignity of it all. He treated the volunteers with disdain, barking orders and generally making a nuisance of himself. I received regular, scathing reports from the soup kitchen manager, detailing his abysmal performance. My lawyer, bless his soul, suggested I revoke the program and cut Ethan off completely. He's incorrigible, Arthur, he said, his voice laced with exasperation. You're wasting your time. But I refused. I had seen glimpses, fleeting moments of something else beneath the layers of arrogance and self-absorption. A flicker of compassion when he helped an elderly woman carry her tray, a hint of shame when a homeless man thanked him for his service. These were small things, almost imperceptible, but they were enough to keep me going. I knew, deep down, that Ethan wasn't inherently bad. He was simply lost, adrift in a sea of privilege and unchecked ego. The frustration, believe me, was immense. There were days when I wanted to throw my hands up and walk away, to let him wallow in his misery. But then I would remember my own father, a man who had clawed his way out of poverty through sheer grit and determination. He had instilled in me the importance of hard work, honesty, and compassion. These were the values I had tried to pass on to Ethan, but somewhere along the way, they had been lost, buried beneath a mountain of designer clothes and empty promises. So I persisted. I remained firm, but I also offered support. I visited him at the soup kitchen, not to lecture or criticize, but simply to observe. I listened to his complaints, his frustrations, his occasional moments of genuine reflection. Slowly, gradually, I began to see a change. He started arriving on time, dressing appropriately, and interacting with the volunteers and the clients with a newfound respect. He even started taking initiative, suggesting improvements to the kitchen layout and organizing donation drives. The anger, the pain, it didn't disappear overnight. There were still setbacks, moments of backsliding, times when I questioned my own sanity. But the overall trajectory was positive. Ethan was learning, slowly but surely, the value of hard work, the importance of empathy, and the true meaning of responsibility. He was discovering that real fulfillment comes not from material possessions, but from making a positive impact on the lives of others. The 6 months eventually came to an end. Ethan had completed his character improvement program, and the trust fund was, technically, reinstated. But something had changed. He didn't immediately rush out to buy a new sports car or book a luxury vacation. Instead, he approached me with a proposition. He wanted to use a portion of his allowance to start a small business, one that would provide job training and employment opportunities for the homeless. That, my friends, was the moment I knew I had succeeded. It wasn't about the money, it was about the transformation. It was about seeing my son, not as the spoiled, entitled brat he once was, but as a compassionate, responsible, and ultimately decent human being. It was a long and arduous journey, filled with pain and frustration, but it was worth every single moment. Because sometimes, the greatest act of love is not to give someone everything they want, but to give them what they need, even if they don't realize it at the time. And sometimes, that means forcing them to confront their own flaws and rediscover the values that truly matter. So look closely at the people in your lives and ask yourself, are you enabling them, or are you truly helping them? The answer, my friends, could change everything. So look closely at the people in your lives and ask yourself, are you enabling them, or are you truly helping them? The answer, my friends, could change everything. And that leads me to the story of Ethan, my son, and the rather unconventional methods I employed to teach him a lesson. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about respect, about understanding the value of hard work, and about recognizing the sacrifices that paved the way for his privileged existence. Ethan, bless his heart, always had a knack for spending money faster than I could make it. He saw my modest lifestyle as an embarrassment, a relic of a bygone era. He couldn't grasp that my contentment stemmed not from material possessions, but from a life of purpose, of meticulous planning, and of securing his future, ironically. His arrogance festered, fueled by a constant stream of trust fund disbursements that shielded him from the realities of the world. He treated me with a condescension that stung, a dismissiveness that chipped away at the father-son bond one desperately tried to maintain. The credit card incident was the last straw. It wasn't just the financial inconvenience, though that was certainly irritating. It was the public humiliation, the smug satisfaction on his face as he announced my financial mismanagement to his circle of sycophants. The laughter echoed in my ears, a chorus of disrespect that solidified my resolve. I felt a cold anger, a quiet fury that simmered beneath my calm exterior. He had crossed a line drawn in years of subtle digs and blatant disregard. That night, as I held the original trust document, a creation born from years of financial acumen and foresight, I wasn't a sad, old man. I was Arthur Vance, the architect, the strategist, the man who knew every loophole, every clause, every possible contingency. Article 27B, Moral Standards and Family Responsibilities, was my weapon, a clause he had undoubtedly overlooked in his haste to cash the checks. It was a long shot, a gamble, but I was betting on his ignorance and arrogance. The fallout was swift and brutal. The luxury watches, the penthouse overlooking the city, the sports car, gone. His shallow friends evaporated like morning mist. The fiancée, predictably, followed suit. His world crumbled around him, a testament to the fragility of a life built on unearned wealth. He came to me, of course, a disheveled mess of desperation and entitlement. He screamed, he pleaded, he even tried to guilt-trip me with accusations of ruining his life. But I remained calm, a fortress of resolve. I handed him the program, the path to redemption, the soup kitchen. 8 hours a day, 6 months, a meager allowance for survival. It was harsh, perhaps even cruel, but I saw it as a necessary intervention, a shock to his system designed to awaken his dormant conscience. It wasn't about punishment, it was about forcing him to confront the consequences of his actions and to understand the true value of a dollar. The irony, of course, was not lost on me. The trust fund, intended to secure his future, had become a tool for his self-destruction. My attempts to provide for him had inadvertently enabled his worst qualities. But sometimes, the greatest act of love is to withhold, to challenge, to force someone to confront their own shortcomings. Whether he truly changed, I can't say for sure. But he learned to live modestly, to appreciate the simple things, and to treat me with a newfound respect, however grudgingly given. And me? I found a purpose in the aftermath. I used the trust fund profits, the fruits of my labor, to establish a charity providing free financial advice to seniors who had been exploited by their own families. I channeled my anger and frustration into something positive, something that could prevent others from experiencing the pain I had endured. So, remember this, wealth without wisdom is a dangerous thing, and sometimes, the toughest love is the most transformative. Don't be afraid to hold those you love accountable. So, remember this, wealth without wisdom is a dangerous thing, and sometimes, the toughest love is the most transformative. Don't be afraid to hold those you love accountable. But let's delve deeper, shall we? It wasn't just about the money, you see. It was about the blatant disrespect, the casual cruelty Ethan wielded like a weapon. The pain of a father watching his son morph into someone unrecognizable, someone who valued status over substance, appearances over genuine connection, that's a pain that cuts deeper than any financial loss. And anger? Oh, it simmered beneath the surface, a slow burn fueled by years of enabling, years of hoping Ethan would eventually see the light. The irony wasn't lost on me, of course. Here I was, the architect of his financial security, the one who painstakingly crafted the trust fund designed to provide him with a life of comfort and opportunity, now having to use that very instrument to teach him a lesson in humility. The calculation was cold, precise, almost clinical. I had to detach myself emotionally, to view Ethan not as my son, but as a beneficiary who had violated the terms of the agreement. It was a necessary, albeit painful, separation. The calm I projected, the unwavering power I exuded as I handed him that piece of paper outlining his character improvement program, that was years in the making. It wasn't arrogance, it was the quiet confidence of a man who knew he was doing what was right, even if it was unpopular, even if it shattered his own heart. The frustration, however, was ever present. The frustration of witnessing Ethan's potential squandered, his intelligence dulled by a life of excess and entitlement. The determination to break through that facade, to force him to confront the consequences of his actions, that fueled my every move. The trial Ethan faced was severe, undeniably. 8 hours a day in a soup kitchen, serving the very people he had likely dismissed as beneath him, it was a harsh sentence. But it was designed to be. It was meant to strip away the layers of privilege, to expose him to the realities of life for those less fortunate, to force him to confront his own biases and prejudices. The severity was not born of malice, but of a desperate hope that it would shock him awake. And then there was tolerance, or perhaps more accurately, the hope for it. The hope that Ethan would emerge from this experience a changed man, a better man. The hope that he would learn to value hard work, to appreciate the simple things in life, to treat others with respect and compassion. The reconciliation I yearned for was not just between father and son, but between Ethan and himself, between Ethan and the values I had tried to instill in him from the beginning. It wasn't easy watching him struggle, watching him stumble. There were moments when I questioned my own actions, when I wondered if I had gone too far. But I knew, deep down, that I had to stay the course. That sometimes, the only way to truly help someone is to let them fall, to let them experience the consequences of their choices, to let them learn to pick themselves up and dust themselves off. The trust fund wasn't just about money, it was about responsibility. It was about using wealth to create a positive impact on the world, not just to indulge in selfish desires. And that, ultimately, was the lesson I hoped Ethan would learn. The lesson that true wealth lies not in the size of your bank account, but in the richness of your character. The lesson that respect is earned, not given. The lesson that family values are worth more than all the money in the world. And perhaps, just perhaps, he would finally understand that. The long game, that's what I was playing. A game for his soul. A game for our future. And I was determined to win. A game for our future. And I was determined to win. The irony wasn't lost on me, of course. Here I was, a man who'd spent his entire life meticulously planning for every financial contingency, now locked in a battle of wills with his own son, a battle triggered by a simple, yet deeply humiliating, denial of a credit card. The anger simmered, a slow burn beneath the surface of my carefully constructed calm. Ethan, my only son, the supposed heir to my legacy, had publicly embarrassed me, treating me like a financially irresponsible old fool. He thought he was teaching me a lesson about money management. He had no idea the lesson he was about to learn. My initial reaction, I'll admit, was pure, unadulterated rage. The kind that makes your vision blur and your hands clench. But years of financial planning, years of analyzing risk and reward, had taught me the value of calculated action. This wasn't a situation to be resolved with shouting or accusations. This was a game, a high-stakes game with my son's future, and perhaps even his soul, on the line. And I was going to play it with the precision of a surgeon. The calculation began immediately. As I sat in my modest apartment, the contrast between my life and Ethan's extravagant existence became starkly clear. He saw my simplicity as weakness, as an embarrassment to his image of success. He didn't understand that my choices were deliberate, a rejection of the shallow materialism that had consumed him. He thought I was a burden, a financial drain. He was so wrong. The Vance Family Trust. The very name held the key to my plan. It was my masterpiece, a complex web of legal clauses and financial instruments designed to protect the family's wealth for generations to come. And buried deep within its 200 pages was Article 27b, Moral Standards and Family Responsibilities. A clause so obscure, so seemingly insignificant, that even Ethan, the beneficiary, had never bothered to read it. That clause, my friends, was my weapon. It stipulated that in order to receive the full benefits of the trust, the beneficiary must demonstrate respect for the founders and family values. Failure to do so would result in a drastic reduction of payments, down to the statutory minimum living allowance, until a character improvement program, designated by the fund manager, was successfully completed. The power I held, as the trustee, was absolute. And I intended to wield it with unwavering resolve. This wasn't about punishing Ethan. It was about saving him. Saving him from the destructive path he was on, a path paved with arrogance, entitlement, and a complete disregard for the values I had tried to instill in him. I knew the fallout would be significant. Ethan's lavish lifestyle, his failing startup propped up by trust fund money, his shallow friendships, it would all crumble. But sometimes, the only way to rebuild something stronger is to tear down the old foundations. The frustration I felt, the years of watching my son squander his potential, fueled my determination. The call to my old lawyer was brief and to the point. I outlined my plan, citing Article 27B, and requested the immediate restructuring of the Vance family trust. His initial surprise quickly gave way to understanding. He knew me well enough to know that I wouldn't take such drastic action lightly. 2 days later, the dominoes began to fall. Ethan's credit cards were declined. His luxury watch purchase was thwarted. He received the email, the one that would shatter his world. The Vance Family Trust has been restructured under Section 27B. Your monthly allowance is now $2,200. The chaos that ensued was predictable. The anger, the denial, the desperate pleas. I anticipated it all. His life unraveled with breathtaking speed. The car was repossessed, the penthouse foreclosed, the fiancé vanished, the startup went bankrupt. He was left with nothing but the stark reality of his own failings. The confrontation was inevitable. Ethan, disheveled and desperate, burst into my apartment, his voice filled with a mixture of rage and despair. He demanded answers, accused me of ruining his life. I remained calm, sipping my tea, the embodiment of quiet power. I handed him a single sheet of paper. This, I said, my voice firm but devoid of malice, is your character improvement program. You will volunteer 8 hours a day at a local soup kitchen. You have 6 months to relearn the value of money, hard work, and respect. Your credit card will be reactivated, with a $50 daily limit for food and transportation. The severity of my words hung in the air. This wasn't a punishment, it was an opportunity. An opportunity for Ethan to strip away the layers of entitlement and discover his true self. It was a test of his character, a trial by fire. Whether he would succeed, I couldn't say. But I had given him the chance. And in doing so, I had also found a new purpose. I decided to use the profits from the trust fund, the money Ethan had so carelessly squandered, to establish a charity that provides free financial advice to seniors who have been financially abused by their own children. This was my victory. Not in defeating my son, but in potentially saving him. And in finding a way to use my skills, my knowledge, to help those who truly needed it. The tolerance and reconciliation, I hoped, would come in time. For now, I had a new battle to fight, a battle against financial exploitation, and a battle for the future of those who had been left vulnerable. This was a game for our future, a future where respect and responsibility are valued above all else. And I was determined to win. This was a game for our future, a future where respect and responsibility are valued above all else. And I was determined to win. Not in the petty, vengeful way Ethan might have imagined, but in a way that would resonate through generations of our family. The Vance Family Trust wasn't just about money, it was about legacy, about the values we wanted to instill. Ethan, in his arrogance, had forgotten that. He saw only the immediate gratification, the endless flow of funds, without understanding the responsibility that came with it. The irony, of course, was delicious. He, who had always scoffed at my old-fashioned principles, was about to learn a very harsh lesson in them. The anger still simmered, a low, persistent burn, but it was now tempered with a cold, calculating resolve. This wasn't just about punishing Ethan, it was about saving him from himself. He was spiraling, and I was the only one who could pull him back. It wouldn't be easy, it wouldn't be pleasant, but it was necessary. My old lawyer, bless his soul, understood immediately. He'd seen me draft that trust decades ago, knew the meticulous detail I put into every clause, every contingency. He knew Article 27B wasn't just some throwaway line, it was a carefully considered safeguard against precisely this kind of behavior. He chuckled, a dry, rasping sound, and said, "Arthur, you always were a meticulous bastard. But a damn good one." The implementation was swift and brutal. The email to Ethan, terse and impersonal, delivered the blow with surgical precision. His allowance reduced to a pittance, a mere $2,200 a month. Enough to survive, barely, but a far cry from the lavish lifestyle he'd grown accustomed to. I imagined his reaction, the sputtering rage, the disbelief. I pictured him frantically calling his banker, his financial advisor, only to be met with polite but firm refusals. The dominoes were falling, exactly as I'd planned. The frustration was palpable. I knew Ethan would come crawling back, begging for forgiveness, promising to change. But empty words wouldn't suffice. He needed to understand the consequences of his actions, to feel the sting of his own recklessness. The soup kitchen was my lawyer's suggestion, and it was brilliant in its simplicity. 8 hours a day, surrounded by people who had genuinely struggled, people who had known hardship and adversity that Ethan could barely imagine. It was a crucible, a trial by fire. The confrontation, when it finally came, was exactly as I expected. Ethan, disheveled and desperate, barged into my modest apartment, his face contorted with a mixture of anger and fear. He screamed, he pleaded, he accused me of ruining his life. I remained calm, sipping my tea, the picture of serene detachment. "This," I said, handing him the program details, "is your opportunity to earn back my respect, and more importantly, your own." The severity of the situation was not lost on him. The daily limit on his reactivated credit card, a paltry $50 for food and transportation, was a constant reminder of his fall from grace. He hated it, of course. He complained, he whined, he tried every trick in the book to get more money. But I was unyielding. This wasn't about punishment, it was about transformation. He had to learn to live within his means, to appreciate the value of a dollar, to understand the struggles of ordinary people. 6 months. It felt like an eternity. There were days I doubted my own plan, days I wondered if I was being too harsh. But I reminded myself that this wasn't just about Ethan. It was about the principles I believed in, the values I wanted to pass on. It was about ensuring that the Vance family trust would be a force for good, not just a source of endless entitlement. Tolerance, I realized, was not about condoning bad behavior. It was about giving someone the opportunity to redeem themselves, to learn from their mistakes. Reconciliation, however, required genuine remorse and a commitment to change. Ethan had a long way to go. But I saw glimmers of hope, moments of genuine empathy, small acts of kindness that suggested he was finally starting to understand. In the end, he completed the program. He didn't emerge a saint, but he was undeniably changed. He was humbler, more respectful, more aware of the world around him. He still had his flaws, of course, but he was no longer the arrogant, entitled brat he once was. And so, the trust was reinstated. Not as a reward, but as a second chance. And I, in turn, found a new purpose, a new sense of fulfillment. The charity I established, providing free financial advice to seniors, became my passion. It was a way to give back, to help those who had been taken advantage of, to prevent others from suffering the same fate as I almost did. The lesson, I hope, is clear. Money is a tool, not a birthright. Respect is earned, not given. And family, above all else, is worth fighting for. So, if you find yourself in a similar situation, remember this story. Remember the Vance family trust, and remember the power of a well-crafted clause. But most importantly, remember the importance of love, forgiveness, and the unwavering belief in the potential for redemption. Because sometimes, the greatest victories are not measured in dollars and cents, but in the transformation of a human heart. Don't let arrogance blind you. Learn from Ethan's mistakes. Teach your children the value of hard work, respect, and responsibility. That's the real legacy we leave behind. Alright, let's dive deeper into this whole situation. It's more than just a story about a son canceling his father's credit card. It's about respect, values, and the unintended consequences of unchecked privilege. You see, Ethan, bless his heart, never really understood the value of a dollar. He grew up swimming in money, believing it was an endless resource. That's not entirely his fault, of course. I, as his father, share some responsibility. I wanted him to have a better life than I did, but somewhere along the line, I failed to instill in him the importance of hard work and financial responsibility. The anger I felt in that restaurant, watching him laugh, wasn't just about the embarrassment of a declined credit card. It was about the years of subtle disrespect, the constant belittling of my choices, my lifestyle. He saw my frugality as a sign of weakness, not understanding it was a conscious decision, a way of honoring the sacrifices I made to build that trust fund in the first place. The irony is almost unbearable. He, the supposed businessman, the entrepreneur, was financially illiterate, completely dependent on a system he didn't even bother to understand. And I, the outdated, old man, held all the cards. That night, staring at the trust documents, I wasn't driven by a desire for revenge. Yes, there was anger, a deep, burning frustration. But more than that, there was a profound sadness. My son, the person I loved more than anything, had become someone I barely recognized. The moral standards and family responsibilities clause wasn't just a legal loophole, it was a desperate attempt to salvage what was left of our relationship, to force him to confront the reality of his actions. The fallout was swift and brutal. Watching his world crumble was painful, believe me. But it was a necessary pain. His cars were repossessed, his penthouse was gone, his fiancée, a woman who clearly valued his wealth more than him, disappeared. His friends, those shallow sycophants, vanished like smoke. His startup, built on empty promises and inflated egos, collapsed under the weight of its own incompetence. He was stripped bare, forced to face the consequences of his choices. When he came to my apartment, disheveled and desperate, I saw a flicker of the son I used to know. The arrogance was gone, replaced by fear and a desperate plea for help. Handing him the paper outlining his character improvement program wasn't about punishment. It was about giving him a chance, a structured path back to reality. The soup kitchen wasn't just a place to serve food, it was a place to learn humility, to connect with people struggling to survive, to understand the value of a hard day's work. The limited credit card wasn't about control, it was about teaching him to budget, to make responsible choices, to appreciate the things he had taken for granted. The calm that followed wasn't a triumphant victory. It was a fragile peace, a hope that maybe, just maybe, Ethan would learn from this experience. And the decision to use the trust fund profits to help other seniors who had been financially abused by their children. That was about turning pain into purpose, about creating something positive out of a deeply personal tragedy. It was about ensuring that other families wouldn't have to endure the same heartache. It was about leaving a legacy of compassion and financial literacy. This wasn't just about money, it was about values. So, take a good look at your own family. Are you teaching your children the true meaning of wealth? Are you instilling in them a sense of responsibility and respect? Because in the end, that's all that really matters. That's the legacy that will endure, long after the money is gone. Don't let your children become victims of their own privilege. Teach them the value of hard work, empathy, and genuine human connection. It's the most valuable investment you can ever make. Share this story, start a conversation, and let's build a world where respect and responsibility are valued above all else. It's the most valuable investment you can ever make. Share this story, start a conversation, and let's build a world where respect and responsibility are valued above all else. Because let's be honest, how many times have we seen stories of entitled children squandering fortunes, disrespecting their elders, and generally behaving like spoiled brats? It's a narrative that, unfortunately, resonates with a lot of people. But what happens when the tables are turned? When the seemingly helpless parent, the one being mocked and dismissed, holds the ultimate trump card? That's the story of Arthur and Ethan Vance, a story that explores the complexities of family, wealth, and the often painful lessons we need to learn about respect. Arthur, a man who dedicated his life to mastering the intricacies of finance, understood that true wealth isn't just about the money in your bank account. It's about character, integrity, and a deep understanding of the value of hard work. He tried to instill these values in Ethan, but somewhere along the way, Ethan got lost in the allure of luxury and easy money. He saw his father's simple lifestyle as an embarrassment, a relic of a bygone era, completely failing to grasp the wisdom behind it. The irony, of course, is that Ethan's lavish lifestyle was entirely dependent on Arthur's financial acumen. The very man he was mocking was the architect of his fortune. The frustration Arthur felt was palpable, a simmering anger masked by a calm exterior. He watched helplessly as his son drifted further and further away from the values he held dear, blinded by the glitter of a life he hadn't earned. The breaking point, the public humiliation at Ethan's birthday party, was the catalyst for Arthur's plan. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the blatant disrespect, the casual cruelty that Ethan displayed. It was a slap in the face to everything Arthur had worked for, a betrayal of the family values he had tried so hard to instill. That's when the financial planner, the meticulous strategist, resurfaced. He wasn't just going to cut Ethan off, he was going to teach him a lesson, a harsh but necessary lesson about responsibility and respect. The Moral Standards and Family Responsibilities Clause, Article 27b, was Arthur's masterpiece. A seemingly innocuous detail buried deep within the trust documents, it was a failsafe, a safety net designed to prevent exactly this kind of situation. It was a testament to Arthur's foresight, his ability to anticipate potential problems and create solutions long before they arose. Ethan, in his arrogance, had never bothered to read the fine print, assuming that the money would simply keep flowing. He was about to learn a very painful lesson about the importance of due diligence. The implementation of Arthur's plan was swift and decisive. The dominoes began to fall, one by one, as Ethan's carefully constructed world crumbled around him. The luxury watch, the symbol of his supposed success, was the first casualty. Then came the car, the penthouse, the fiancé, and finally, the startup. Ethan's life, built on a foundation of borrowed money and borrowed success, collapsed under the weight of his own arrogance. When Ethan finally confronted Arthur, disheveled and desperate, the power dynamic had shifted completely. Arthur, calmly sipping his tea, held all the cards. The character improvement program, volunteering at a soup kitchen, was more than just a punishment, it was an opportunity for Ethan to reconnect with reality, to see the world through a different lens. It was a chance for him to learn the value of hard work, of helping others, and of appreciating the simple things in life. The $50 daily limit on his credit card was a constant reminder of the consequences of his actions, a stark contrast to the unlimited spending he had become accustomed to. It was a taste of reality, a dose of humility that he desperately needed. Ultimately, Arthur's actions weren't about revenge. They were about redemption, about giving his son a chance to become a better person. He used the trust fund profits to establish a charity, helping seniors who had been financially abused by their own children. It was a way to turn a personal tragedy into something positive, to use his financial expertise to protect those who were most vulnerable. And in doing so, he found a new purpose, a sense of peace, and the respect of those who truly needed him. The story of Arthur and Ethan Vance is a cautionary tale, a reminder that wealth without responsibility is a dangerous thing. It's a call to action, urging us to prioritize values over possessions, respect over entitlement, and genuine connection over superficial success. It's a challenge to examine our own lives, to ask ourselves if we are truly living up to our potential, and to strive to be better, more responsible members of our families and our communities. So, what do you think? Have you ever witnessed a similar situation? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Let's start a conversation about the importance of financial literacy, family values, and the responsibility that comes with wealth. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more thought-provoking stories. And remember, the most valuable investment you can make is in yourself and in the relationships that matter most. Okay, here's the continuation of the script, aiming for approximately 1,000 words and adhering to all specified guidelines. I've focused on developing the existing plot points and adding depth to the characters' motivations and emotional states. And remember, the most valuable investment you can make is in yourself and in the relationships that matter most. It's a lesson I learned the hard way, a lesson etched in the lines on my face and the weariness in my bones. You might think, looking at me now, that I'm just a grumpy old man. Maybe I am. But I've also seen things, done things, and built things that my son, Ethan, could only dream of. And it was that disconnect, that chasm between his perceived reality and the truth of our family's legacy, that ultimately led to the whole credit card debacle. The anger, you see, wasn't just about the humiliation at the restaurant. It was about years of watching Ethan squander his potential, treat his inheritance like a bottomless pit, and, frankly, look down on me for living a life of purpose instead of excess. He saw my frugality as a sign of weakness, not understanding that it was born from a deep respect for the value of $1, a lesson hard-earned during my own lean years. He thought I was envious of his lavish lifestyle, when in reality, I pitied him. He was trapped in a gilded cage of his own making, a prisoner of his own shallow desires. The irony, of course, is that he thought he was punishing me, teaching me a lesson about managing my finances. The sheer audacity of it. He, who had never worked a day in his life that truly challenged him, who had never known the sting of failure or the satisfaction of honest labor, dared to lecture me on financial responsibility. It was a slap in the face, not just to me, but to everything I had worked for, everything I had instilled in the Vance family trust. That trust, you see, wasn't just about money. It was about values. It was about ensuring that future generations understood the importance of hard work, humility, and respect. That's why I included that seemingly innocuous clause, Article 27b, the Moral Standards and Family Responsibilities clause. I knew Ethan hadn't read the fine print. He never did. He just saw the dollar signs. And that's where he made his fatal mistake. The calm that washed over me after leaving that restaurant wasn't the calm of resignation, but the calm of a chess master contemplating his next move. I knew exactly what I had to do. It wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about correction. It was about forcing Ethan to confront the consequences of his actions and, hopefully, learn a valuable lesson in the process. Calling my old lawyer, David, was like dusting off an old weapon. We had crafted that trust together, meticulously, painstakingly, ensuring that it was airtight. He understood my intentions, my hopes for Ethan, and my disappointment in the path he had chosen. There was a grim satisfaction in his voice as he outlined the steps we would take to invoke Article 27b. The implementation was swift and decisive. The email to Ethan, the declined credit cards, the unraveling of his carefully constructed facade, it was all part of the plan. The frustration he felt, the desperation in his voice when he finally burst into my apartment, disheveled and pleading, was a stark contrast to the arrogant young man who had mocked me just days before. Handing him that piece of paper, outlining his character improvement program, was one of the hardest things I've ever done. It was a test, not just for him, but for me. Could I watch my own son struggle, knowing that I had the power to alleviate his suffering? Could I stand firm in my conviction that this was the only way he would truly learn? The 6 months that followed were difficult, to say the least. I watched him volunteer at the soup kitchen, day after day, serving meals to the homeless and the hungry. I saw the initial resentment in his eyes slowly replaced by something else, a flicker of understanding, a glimmer of empathy. He began to see the world through a different lens, to appreciate the simple things in life, to value human connection over material possessions. He didn't transform overnight. He still had his moments of arrogance and entitlement. But he was making progress. And that was enough. The severity of the situation forced him to confront his own flaws and to begin the long, arduous journey of self-improvement. In the end, it wasn't just Ethan who learned a lesson. I learned one too. I learned that even the most carefully crafted plans can have unintended consequences, that sometimes the most effective form of punishment is simply giving someone the opportunity to grow. And I learned that even the most strained relationships can be healed, given enough time, patience, and a healthy dose of tough love. The charity I established, providing free financial advice to seniors, wasn't just a way to put the trust fund profits to good use. It was a way to atone for my own mistakes, to use my knowledge and experience to help others avoid the pitfalls that I had witnessed firsthand. It was a way to find purpose and meaning in my retirement, to leave a legacy that extended beyond my family. So, what's the takeaway from all of this? It's simple: money isn't everything. Respect, humility, and genuine human connection are the true currencies of life. And sometimes, the hardest lessons are the most valuable. Now, I encourage you to share your own stories of family challenges and financial lessons in the comments below. Let's start a conversation and learn from each other. And if you found this story insightful, please share it with your friends and family. You never know who might need to hear it. Alright, let's talk about the aftermath. Remember how Ethan was living the high life, completely oblivious to the source of his fortune and the strings attached. His arrogance, his dismissiveness towards me, his own father, it was infuriating. The humiliation at his birthday party, that was the last straw. Seeing the smug look on his face as he announced to everyone that he'd cut off my credit card, that's when something inside me snapped. But anger alone doesn't solve problems. It clouds judgment. I had to channel that frustration, that burning injustice, into something constructive, something calculated. That's where the Vance Family Trust came in. It wasn't just a document, it was my masterpiece, a testament to my decades of experience in the financial world. Every clause, every contingency, meticulously planned and executed. And Article 27B? That was my ace in the hole. Watching Ethan's life unravel was complicated. Part of me, the father in me, felt a pang of guilt. Seeing him lose his car, his penthouse, his fiancée, it wasn't easy. But another part of me, the financial planner, the architect of the trust, knew it was necessary. He needed to understand the value of hard work, the importance of respect, the consequences of his actions. His transformation, or at least the appearance of it, was gradual. The first few weeks at the soup kitchen were a disaster. He was arrogant, entitled, completely out of touch with reality. But slowly, something started to change. He started to listen to the stories of the people he was serving, to understand their struggles, their hardships. He started to see the world through different eyes. Did he truly change? That's a question I still grapple with. Maybe he just learned to play the part, to say the right things, to do what was necessary to get his money back. But even if that's the case, he still learned a valuable lesson. He learned that actions have consequences, that money doesn't buy happiness, and that respect is earned, not given. And what about me? I could have just cut him off completely, left him to fend for himself. But that wouldn't have solved anything. It would have just created more resentment, more bitterness. Instead, I used the trust fund as a tool for education, for rehabilitation. I gave him a chance to learn from his mistakes, to become a better person. The charity I established, providing free financial advice to seniors who have been financially abused by their children, that was my way of turning a negative experience into something positive. It was my way of using my knowledge and expertise to help those who are most vulnerable, to protect them from the kind of exploitation that I myself had experienced. So, what's the takeaway from all this? It's about more than just money. It's about family, respect, and the importance of ethical behavior. It's about understanding the power of the contracts we create and using that power responsibly. It's about recognizing that true wealth lies not in material possessions, but in the relationships we build and the impact we have on the world. Ultimately, this wasn't just about punishing my son. It was about teaching him a lesson that I hope he will carry with him for the rest of his life. And it was about finding a new purpose for myself, a way to use my skills and experience to make a difference in the lives of others. If you're a parent, think about the values you're instilling in your children. Are you teaching them the importance of hard work, respect, and financial responsibility? Are you setting a good example for them to follow? If you're a beneficiary of a trust fund, take the time to understand the terms and conditions. Don't take your wealth for granted. Remember that it comes with responsibilities. And if you've ever been in a similar situation, where you've been financially abused or taken advantage of, know that you're not alone. There are resources available to help you. Don't be afraid to reach out for help. So, that's my story. A story of betrayal, humiliation, and ultimately, redemption. A story of a father who used his financial expertise to teach his son a valuable lesson. I hope it's given you something to think about. Maybe it's even inspired you to take action in your own life. Now, I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on this story? Have you ever experienced anything similar? Share your comments below. Let's start a conversation. And if you found this story insightful, please share it with your friends and family. You never know who might need to hear it. More importantly, take a moment to reflect on your own values and how you can make a positive impact on the world around you. Consider supporting organizations that fight financial abuse and promote financial literacy. Every little bit helps to create a more just and equitable world for everyone. Thanks for listening.